Hello and welcome to my video on heating your koi pond. I'm going to split this video into three different sections. So the first section I'm going to talk about what temperatures I like to keep my koi pond at and why. The second section is going to be on what is best to insulate your koi pond and methods to insulate it. And then the third and final method is going to be different types of heating systems and what sort of scenarios you should use those different type of heating systems in. So first of all, we'll start with the temperatures of my koi ponds. Today's date is the 10th of December, so it's getting on to winter now, and a normal koi pond would be around 10 degrees at the most, I should imagine, an unheated, uninsulated koi pond that's outside. So I'll start with showing you my temperatures on my ponds. So this here is my main pond, and as you can see it is 18.4 degrees. The 7.15 refers to the pH level of the pond. So 18.4 degrees for that one. And then we'll look at the quarantine tank, which is around here. And if you can see, that is 19.2 degrees. And the pH is 7.99. That was 19.2. Right, I'll put back over here. So as you can see, my ponds are fairly warm and the fish are eating really well, and it's 18 degrees is quite warm for a koi pond, so they're doing pretty well. But it is winter, so why is my koi pond at that temperature? Well, it is at that temperature because it's slightly behind the seasons of the actual weather. Because it's indoors, it's held back a little bit by that. So I don't get to my coldest point till probably February, mid-February, at which point it'll probably be around 14 degrees. The temperatures it gets to in summer is about 20-23 degrees, somewhere in that range. I think the most it gets to is 23 degrees, which is just fine by me because that's a good temperature. It probably stays about a week at that temperature in the summer, and the rest of the time it's usually about 21, 22. As a minimum temperature, the minimum temperature I keep this pond is 14 degrees. It is not heated, this pond. The reason why it stays at 14 degrees is because it's so well insulated and it's indoors. The building is heated all the time, and I'll get into that later. So why do I like to keep it at 14 degrees and around that sort of mark? Well, at that temperature the fish are eating fine. If it did get any lower than that, I would consider heating the pond directly, but it doesn't, and I'm quite happy with that. So what kind of temperature should you look at staying as a minimum in a koi pond? If you want the fish to be active and moving about, the minimum temperature really is 10 degrees. You can't feed them so much at 10 degrees because it's a cold temperature and they won't be eating. But at 10 degrees and above, you'll find that your filtration system keeps active, so it won't die back, and your fish's immune system's running fine and they're all active and also active in that sort of range. Below 10 degrees your filtration system dies off, so when it comes back to spring, your filtration system has to redevelop and remature, which takes time and stops you from feeding them in that time scale. So I like to keep it above 10 degrees. Obviously that's not easy to achieve goal for a lot of outside ponds, because 10 degrees would require a lot of heating. So what's the minimum temperature of a koi pond? Absolute minimum. Well, I think the absolute minimum is 4 degrees for a koi pond, and the temperature can drop below that quite easily. In a lake or a river, temperature will not get below 4 degrees as such. There will be always spots in a river or a lake where the temperature is 4 degrees, and because of that, and they don't experience the low temperatures like that in the wild, I personally think it's cruel to allow a pond's temperature to get below 4 degrees, and this is why I think heating is important and good insulation on any koi pond. What temperatures can your pond get to? Well, your pond can get well below 4 degrees. With the air bubbles like I've got going here and a good circulation of water, it could get to -1 and the water wouldn't even freeze. This pond will never get to -1 because it'd be really cold in here if it did. But if it was outside, it could quite easily. And the problem with that, the water's not freezing and it's -1. So why is it not freezing? The water's not freezing because it's moving. But what happens is the water inside your fish is not moving. So that -1 water will be inside your fish and it'll freeze your fish internally. You know, your fish will be internally and just turn to ice. And that'd be a terrible death for a fish. And that does happen. It can happen. It's never quite happened to me like that, but I've had issues with cold weather before in my outdoor ponds, and made mistakes that I shouldn't have done, and would totally avoid doing now if I was in the same position. So when I say a minimum of 10 degrees is for my pond, the reason why I stick to that is because between 6 and 10 degrees your fish are more susceptible to bacteria. Below 10 degrees and above 6 degrees, bacteria is still going about in your pond and so, but your fish's immune system below 10 degrees is not existent. So your fish are quite susceptible to a lot of issues. So if you are letting your pond cool down, the period in between 6 and 10 degrees is quite a bad point for your fish to be in for any extended period of time. And from there I will move on to insulating. So what's the best method to insulate your koi pond? Well, this koi pond is obviously built really well insulated, and I would recommend building a koi pond as insulated as this one, so if I was building an outdoor one. And by that I mean these walls are foot thick walls, so the 300mm walls, and what you get is you get 100mm of brick or 100mm of concrete block, 100mm insulation, and then 100mm external brick that's on the outside wall, and that insulation keeps any wind that's hitting the outside walls from affecting your pond at all, and that dramatically increases the pond's heat retention because of that. But the insulation only goes down to the floor level outside, so below the floor level outside is 7.2 Newton concrete blocks, which is what this is all the way up, because this is inside, and this is unsupported, so it needed to be that bit stronger. But below the ground level you don't have a wind chill factor and that sort of issues, but below the ground level what you'll find that the water heats the ground up around during summer, and then that heat will be spread into your pond during winter. It'll reverse back and go into your pond. Like around this pond there's a foot thick concrete blocks all the way around it below the floor level, so they'll store heat and then release it back in the winter when it's needed. And then same with the base of this pond. The base of the pond is a foot thick reinforced concrete, so that big concrete slab will be storing heat from the summer and then releasing it back into the water during the winter. So that's a good reason not to insulate that as such, because it makes your pond's temperature more stable by taking away the heat from it in the summer and giving it back in the winter. So the main thing, one thing you'll notice with this pond, this pond is, being an indoor pond, this pond's quite got good air circulation in here. And what happens is you get this level here, because you can see it and there's not, you know, that movement on it. This bit here is sort of separated from the building, so if my hand is here, I can feel, you know, it just feels like normal air in the building. But if I put my hand here, I can feel the water, you know, the temperature of the water, the moisture of the water, and it all settles in this area here. Now in this pond, the air temperature in the pond is actually 2 degrees warmer than the water itself, so that's what keeps this in here. And it's important for me, for the opposite reason it'd be important for an outdoor pond to keep this in, and that's because if this mixed with the air above and the air in the building, then what I get is an issue with humidity and damp and all that in the building. So that layer has to be kept there and stopped from mixing with the air in the building. But this is also important for an outdoor koi pond. That air should be kept there and not disturbed, because if the wind is passing over this pond, it's amazing how much a slight bit of wind chill over the pond will actually affect the temperature of the pond. If you stop the wind from going over the pond and insulate it over the top, you will notice that the pond retains its heat a lot better. So one thing you can use to retain the heat over a pond is polycarbonate panels. If you just like put a polycarbonate panel over the top of the pond, and that will keep this air gap here, and it'll keep the it'll keep that area covered over your pond. Polycarbonate sheets are what they use for conservatory roofs, so they're clear like a plastic, and it's good because it allows light to get through into your pond, so your fish will not lose the colour and they'll still, you know, be able to tell the difference between day and night. So polycarbonate panels are really insulating. They allow you to get light into your pond and heat from the sun into your pond. The sheets also allow you to, you know, keep snow off your pond, so if it snows, that snow will settle onto your polycarbonate panels and it'll not actually go into your water. It may drip in when it melts, but that's not too much of a problem. The issue is keeping the snow out of the water. So that's one advantage to that. Another way of doing it is, like, you could have like a greenhouse sort of thing over the top of your pond. So you can have, you know, if you've got like a little bubble wrap and did like a little tunnel that goes over your pond as such, that'd be, you know, really good, because it'd have the air gap inside and be really well insulating for your pond. And if you can't, if like me you've got no edges around your pond, so I couldn't put polycarbonate sheets over there and all that sort of stuff, what you could do is put bubble wrap and settle it on your pond. That would, obviously you wouldn't have the air gap, but you'd still keep the wind off your pond and stuff like that, and you can let the light in, and it'd be better than nothing. Obviously I do not cover this pond because it's indoors and it is covered up by a roof anyway. It doesn't matter to me. It's just good practice for outdoor ponds, because covering them will help you koi through the winter period. You only have to cover it through winter, just when the temperature starts to drop, and then it'll keep the temperature in your pond. So the next step to talk about is the heating elements themselves. What's the best method of heating your pond? If you want to keep your pond from going below that 4-degree mark, which I highly recommend, because I do think it's quite cruel, then the best sort of heating for that, really, if you just want to keep it above 4 degrees, is a heater kind of like this. You can get inline versions, but this is one that just goes into your tank. I'd probably recommend an inline version for an actual pond, because these get quite hot and can burn your fish, and an inline version will mix the hot water a little bit better, where these might create hot spots in your pond. But anyway, this is what I've got and what I use, and it's just like a springs that go down here, and these springs glow red and heat the water up. And they're quite good heaters. These are cheap. I think these are like 30 quid each, something like that. It's a 150 watt heater. The recommendation for heating a pond is 1 kilowatt per 1,000 gallons, and that should heat your pond about 1 degree every 5 to 6 hours with a well insulated pond, should I say. The maximum size heater that you can get for these is about 3 kilowatts, where you can still get it on a standard, UK plug. 3 kilowatt one is the biggest you can get on that plug. Any bigger than that, so if you have more than a 3,000 gallon pond, any bigger, you'd be looking at wiring it in permanently and probably running new cables from your consumer unit if it's considerably bigger than that. So I've got one already in my quarantine tank that I sit in here all the time. This one's just for emergencies. I leave that, it's not switched on, it's never usually switched on. That's for if I have a problem with cold water going into my pond, because I have a trickle in here all the time. If the water's particularly cold, I'll turn it on, which it does get like that in the proper winter, when it goes really cold. And I've just got a couple of fish in there at the minute, which I got the other day. I've not started feeding them yet, so they're not used to me, but eventually they'll get there. So yeah, if I'm actually heating the pond, I'll put both of them heaters in, because that's a 500 gallon pond, and it wants that 300 watt heating is just about right for me in that pond, because it's indoors. It's also heated by the temperature in this building. Now, if you want to keep your pond above that 10 degree mark, I would seriously recommend getting an air source heat pump. This building is heated by an air source heat pump. The ponds are not heated by that. It literally just heats the air inside this building. And this is the air source heat pump back here. It's that. Then that's just like a radiator from it. But you do get versions that work as inline heaters, so the water from your pumps just goes straight into the air source heat pump's outside unit, and straight out and then back into your pond. And these units look like this one out here. I'll show you this unit here. So they all look like this sort of thing. This is obviously one that does the air in the building, just heats the air up. You see it running at the minute, the fan on. But the versions that heat ponds up are very similar to this. It's just that the pipe work in them isn't gas, it's just water from your pond, so you get like a 2-inch inlet and outlet from it, depending on what model you go for. So the advantage of them is simple. They we'll put it this way, these heaters use 300 watts. This whole heater that heats the building, and they just heat that little quarantine tank, this whole heater that heats this entire building, and as it heats the entire building, it keeps the quarantine tank and the main pond warm, is 700 watts. It uses 700 watts at most, and it does use less when it's got running. But it gives out a 6 kilowatt output. So that 6 kilowatts is really useful. It really well heats the pond. It really well heats the building, that 6 kilowatt output. But it only uses 700 watts to do that output, whereas one of these would require 6 kilowatt input to have a 6 kilowatt output. So that 700 watt air source heat pump is equivalent to a 6 kilowatt one of those. And they obviously a 6 kilowatt one of these probably costs around 400 quid. That's just off the top of my head, random figure, but I'd say around 400 quid for a 6 kilowatt version. So that costs 3,000 quid. But say 6 kilowatt heater on a quarter of the time of year, which it could be, especially heating this building as warm as it is. This building is 20 degrees, I'll show you that. This building is 20 degrees all year round, so in fact it's a little bit warmer in summer. And you can see it, there you go, 20 degrees. I've set it to, or 20 and a half. A 6 kilowatt heater on this pond would cost me, to run it, say it's on quarter of the time in a year, which it could be on a quarter of the time in a year quite easily. A 6 kilowatt heater would cost me £1,500 a year to run, £1,500, whereas a 700 watt air source heat pump that gives out the equivalent of a 6 kilowatt heater would cost me about £175 a year to run. And that's about accurate. That's about what I reckon it does cost me to run. So, you know, there's a huge difference in the actual buying costs of the unit, but on the running side, I'm probably saving, you know, £1,000 a year at least in running costs alone. So it pays for itself quite quickly running an air source heat pump compared to a standard electric heater, if you're heating to higher temperatures constantly. Now, having said that, a lot of people don't want to put out the commitment of heating to such high temperatures, say 20 degrees all year round. And I don't heat to 20 degrees all year round because I find that giving the koi a winter period improves the colours, improves the body shape, and it allows the koi to settle down from a season of, you know, spawning and stuff like that. As I have had issues in the past when I've kept my ponds at 20 degrees with fish with rancid eggs and things like that. So when I cool the ponds down to 13 degrees and in that sort of temperature, I don't seem to get that problem. And hopefully I won't do this year, we shall see. So there you go. But if you don't want to commit to heating your pond to such high temperatures, I would recommend you definitely try to heat your pond above that 4 degree mark. Not above 6 degrees, I would let it fall below that, because between 6 and 10 is where you get the issues with bacteria being active but your koi's immune system's not. So basically you want to keep it at 4 degrees and don't allow, you know, basically not allowing anything to freeze up. So how would I do that? I would buy an inline heater for that. I wouldn't buy an air source heat pump for that, because they don't work that efficiently at really cold temperatures anyway. So I would buy one of these, and the reason I buy one of these, or an inline version of one of these for a bigger pond, is because, you know, they're cheap to buy, and if you're heating your pond above 4 degrees, you're not going to see it on very much. It'd be on very little, especially if you cover up your pond and make a nice cover for it and make it insulated. Like I said, if you're building your koi pond, you can insulate the walls. If it's not insulated, that's not a problem. You know, it doesn't matter. The main point is covering your pond up. So just to put that heater on at 4 degrees, if it's covered up, you'll probably not see it on very much, and not on enough to use any electricity during the winter periods. It just, that fortnight to 3 weeks where your pond might actually drop below that temperature, 4 degrees, it'll be coming on not an hour a day, and you know, that'll cost very little to run an hour a day, being what, say electric's 15 pence per kilowatt at most. You're looking at about 60p for it running every hour. So 60 pence probably a night for those 3 weeks a year will probably allow your fish to survive quite happily through the winter, and then you'll get a lot less issues during the summer period, and you know, from the winter you'll definitely not have a problem or an issue with worrying that if your koi are going to die because it's gone too cold. And not even every year. I mean, some years are quite mild and don't experience temperatures that low, and some years are terrible and do experience temperatures that low. So one year it might not come on at all, but another year it might be on quite a bit. So, you know, the cost of actually running something like that would be very minimal. But obviously if you're going into higher heated temperatures, the cost of an air source heat pump is expensive initially, but the cost of running, you know, it pays for itself in that aspect. Now there's also a gas method of heating, gas boilers. So you know, your house has a gas boiler already installed, so that's probably a cost that you don't have, because it's already there. All you need to do is buy some copper piping and a heat exchanger, and probably somebody that knows what they're doing to install thermostat and all that sort of stuff onto your gas boiler. And then if your boiler, you know, you set that to, this is for heating above like 10 to 20 degrees all year round, you set that to whatever temperature you want, and the gas boiler will fire up and heat your koi pond, and that'll probably cost you £1,000 to install. It'll have slightly higher running costs than an air source heat pump, but not that much more, especially if you're not heating. Obviously the warmer it gets, the warmer you're heating the water, the more it's going to cost, but the initial cost of the actual stuff is a lot cheaper than an air source heat pump, but an air source heat pump would be slightly cheaper to run. It is just personal preference, because obviously the £3,000 outlay initially for an air source heat pump is quite a big outlay. But also if you do a system like that with an air source heat pump or a gas boiler that heats your pond up to high temperatures, then I do recommend that you get an inline heater after that that's set to a couple of degrees lower. And the reason for that is because air source heat pumps don't work past -12 degrees or -15 degrees, depending on the model. I think mine's -15, but I'm not sure on that. My particular air source heat pump, also when you're looking for air source heat pumps, some do not work below 4 degrees, swimming pool ones, so you really need to be careful which ones you're buying. But they don't work below those temperatures because it's too cold for them, and they're not very efficient in that. I've never ever seen mine turn off. I don't know what it does if it does turn off, but it's not such a problem when you're just being an air heater and being well insulated. Whereas if it was outside pond and it got to say -12 or whatever it is, and the air source heat pump stopped working, and the koi pond was exposed to -12 degrees, it would lose its temperature quite rapidly, and you'd probably find all your fish are dead in the morning. So it is necessary to have an inline electric heater, a normal one that's, you know, fail safe, after your air source heat pump, and then you wouldn't have an issue where if it did turn off or something went wrong with the air source heat pump, because anything could happen, you've still got a backup, and because your fish will die really quickly if the temperature drops like that as fast. But this isn't just a problem with air source heat pumps. Gas boilers also have that problem, all kind of problems like that. I know my condensing gas boiler on my house has a water line that comes out in it and goes down the drain for like the condensation that it collects, and if that freezes up, if that line freezes up, which you can do on a cold night, the boiler stops working. So you don't really know what's going to cause your boiler to start working, but you can guarantee it's going to be at the coldest point, and when your fish are most reliant on it. So it's best to have a backup regular heating system, you know, a backup element heating system like a kettle thing, inline one, so that you can you know, be assured that there's not going to be an issue with that. So what I'm going to do now I've talked about all that, is I'm going to go into the basement and I'm going to show you around in the basement and just talk about the pipework down there and how I insulate my pipework, or in some cases do not insulate the pipework, and why. So I'll see you down there. Welcome back. So here we are going into the basement. As you can see, these are the main 4-inch drain pipes for the pond. There you go, 4-inch pipe for that one, for that drain, and then there's the 1.5-inch inlets for the air intake, and then 4-inch pipe for that one, and then this 3-inch pipe here is for the skimmer, stuff like that. So there we go, and then the blue pipes and all these for mains fresh water. So if you're wondering what these blue pipes are, mains water. Over here, take this towel off it, that's drying. I've got the big bead filter. So as you can see, all these things are not insulated. If these were outside, I'd seriously recommend insulating them, because they are an enormous heat transfer thing. They do give off a lot of heat, and they actually keep this basement really warm. You can feel the warmth in this piping because the basement's about a degree or so colder than the actual pond, and you can feel the warmth on these pipes and on the bead and all that. So if these were outside, definitely recommend insulating them, because frost would be getting to these and the water would probably freeze up inside the pipes in extreme circumstances, and especially inside the bead. I can imagine water freezing inside these, so it'd be alright to put, you could put like I had this towel over it, a good, bit of a jacket around it, something like that. Can't do it with one hand as such, but you get the idea. Just cover it up and that, you could just put a towel over that like that, and it'd some sort of insulating jacket. I'm sure you could get something like for like what hot water tanks have got on the boiler system. If it were outside, I'd just keep the frost off it and make it a lot more thermally efficient. But in a minute I'll get to the reason why I don't do that. Then we've got the other smaller bead filter that runs on this side of the pond. Also not insulated and quite wasteful with heat. But then we've got the quarantine tank, which is heated separately from the basement and that. So I bubble wrap it. Just covering it up with bubble wrap like that makes a tremendous amount of difference, especially to my quarantine tank being such a small tank. All the cold, because there's actually an air vent just here, and all cold comes down. But this bit here, the bubble wrap does quite a good job at insulating it. It just keeps the wind off it, that's the main thing. But you've got these air vents in this basement, so it circulates cold air from outside. Now, the reason why I don't bubble wrap these pipes is because if I did, yes, the pond would be a lot warmer. It'd probably stay at 18 degrees in winter. But what you get then is it'd probably stay at 18 degrees in summer as well, because these, in summer, the opposite happens and hot air comes through these and then heats the pond up for free, you know what I mean? So that's an advantage to me for not insulating them. And I like to give the fish a winter period, so the actual coolness that these vents let through is enough to cool it to 14 degrees, but it doesn't get any lower than that. I think last year it got to 13.6 in its lowest, so that's just fine. That's fabulous temperature, and that's where all this exposed pipe work. And if it did get any lower than that, I probably would insulate it, and if I were to heat the pond separately on its own system, I would also insulate it, but I don't do that, so it works as it is for me. But if these things are outside, they definitely want insulating, because the frost and that will definitely freeze up. Now, I don't know whether these bead filters might even have some problem with starting to freeze up. If they did freeze up, you could crack them and damage them, and damage bits on them and damage your pipe work, filters and UV lights and stuff like that. These all need protecting from the cold if that's an issue. One thing I do in summer is I've got like these heaters. I've got one upstairs as well. These run off the solar panels directly, so if my house isn't using the electricity from the solar panels, it gets diverted to them for little cost. For no cost. The electric's free from the solar panels, so it just uses the electric from the solar panels, and that heats in here up, and that heats the pond up, because it's amazing how much effect heating in the basement up has on the pond. I've done it before where I've heated the basement up, sorry, and it is brought the temperature of the pond up quite a bit. So I did that this year with waste electricity from solar panels. So there you go, that's the end of the video. Any comments, please drop them below. Any questions, drop them below. I'll look at this. This is a cabbage that they're eating. They kept pecking at it while I was making the video, and it was quite annoying me. So I've done that. That's why they were a bit upset with me. and obviously I've got a tub of food for them. My next video I think will be on the food that I feed them. So I'm gonna make a video on the different types of food I feed them and different types of year. That's some food I've just bought, some bread. So look out for that in the future. Thanks for watching. Like I said, any questions drop them below, and I'll see you in the next video.